No music, no title card, just silence. Look at this stone column in Rome, carved over 2,000 years ago. It shows warriors on their knees, their fortress burning, their king dead. Rome said it was over. Rome was wrong. This is the story of a people who were declared finished by the most powerful empire on earth. Their land was taken. Their name was erased from history books. Their gods were banned. Their language was buried. And yet, they survived. Not in legends, not in poems, in blood. Scientists recently extracted DNA from ancient burial sites in Romania, graves that are over 2,000 years old. What they found shocked them. The genetic signal of these ancient people was still alive in modern populations. The conquered had outlasted the conquerors. History is written by the winners, but genetics is written by the living. And the living in those Carpathian mountains never stopped being Dacian. Before this video ends, you will realize this is not just Romania's story. When this is the story of every single people who was ever told, your time is over. You are finished. You are gone. If hidden genetic histories like this fascinate you, subscribe right now, because we uncover the stories that science buried. And before we go any further, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your country in the comments below. And tell us, have you ever done a DNA ancestry test? What did it show you? Because by the end of this video, your results might connect directly to everything we are about to uncover. Now, let us go back to the beginning, not to 106 AD when Rome won the war. Further back, much further, because to understand how the Dacians survived everything history threw at them, you first need to understand what made them unlike any other people in ancient Europe. And that answer does not begin in Romania. It begins on the open grasslands of Central Asia 5,000 years ago. Segment 2, the origin. Picture this, an endless flat land stretching from Eastern Europe all the way to Central Asia. No cities, no farms, just grass, sky, horses, and people who had never stopped moving. These were the Yamnaya, Bronze Age nomads who lived on horseback, buried their dead under mounds of earth, and around 3000 BC, they began moving west. According to geneticist David Reich, whose 2018 book, Who We Are and How We Got Here, changed everything we understood about ancient migration. This Yamnaya expansion was one of the most significant population movements in all of human prehistory. They brought with them a Y chromosome marker called haplogroup R1b, and they swept through Europe like a wave. The ancestors of the Dacians carried this same steppe blood. But here is the thing most people miss. The Dacians were not simply descended from these nomads. Beneath the steppe signal, scientists found a second, older layer, deep Neolithic farmer ancestry, the genetic echo of the first people who ever planted seeds in southeastern Europe, thousands of years before the Yamnaya ever arrived. Two completely different worlds collided in those Carpathian mountains. One world was nomadic, always moving, never settling. The other world was agricultural, rooted, patient, tied to the land. What they produced together was something neither group had ever been before. A mountain civilization, stone fortresses in the high peaks, a culture that belonged to neither the steppe nor the valley, and so built something entirely its own. And here is the genetic proof that still exists today. Haplogroup E201, one of the oldest European DNA lineages, going all the way back to the first hunter-gatherers who walked this continent after the last ice age, appears at high frequencies in rural Romanian communities even now. These people are a living biological bridge to an ancient Europe that no longer exists anywhere else. But two bloodlines were only part of the story, because when scientists looked even deeper into Dacian DNA, they found something that had absolutely no business being in those mountains, something that pointed east, far east. Now, this is the part where the story stops making sense. In a 2018 study published in the journal Nature, geneticist Ian Matthieson and his team analyzed ancient genomes from southeastern European populations. What they found inside the Paleo-Balkan genetic profile, the group that the Dacians belonged to, was a faint but real signal of ancient Iranian ancestry. Not Slavic, not Roman, not Greek. Iranian. A genetic thread running from the Carpathian Mountains all the way east toward the ancient Persian world. How did it get there? Nobody has a clean answer, but here is what makes this even stranger. The Dacians worshipped a god called Zalmoxis. Ancient Greek historians wrote about him with confusion. His theology did not look Greek. It did not look Roman. He taught that death was not an ending, that the soul was immortal, that warriors who died in battle would rise again. Some historians today point out that this belief structure looks remarkably similar to early Zoroastrian thought, the ancient Persian religion built on the idea of a singular divine truth and the soul's journey beyond death. The DNA whispered of the East. The religion confirmed what the DNA was saying, and then there was the battle standard. The Dacians carried into war a weapon banner called the Draco, a wolf's head made of metal, attached to a long fabric tube shaped like a serpent's body. When warriors ran, wind entered the mouth and the fabric rippled and roared. Half wolf, half serpent. Neither Greek nor Roman. Neither Eastern nor Western. Entirely, impossibly Dacian. 3 genetic worlds, steppe nomads, Neolithic farmers, and Eastern Iranian ancestry, fused into one mountain people, one culture, one terrifying battle standard, and then Rome arrived. What happened next in laboratories across Europe should have been completely predictable. Instead, it became one of the most debated genetic mysteries in all of European archaeology. AILURE 106 AD. Emperor Trajan has just won the greatest military campaign of his reign. The Dacian capital, Sarmizegetusa, has fallen. The Dacian king Decebalus has taken his own life, rather than be paraded through Rome in chains. Trajan's column, back in Rome, will forever celebrate this moment. What comes next is the Roman colonization of Dacia, and it was enormous. These settlers arrived from every corner of the empire: Syria, North Africa, Italy, Iberia, the Danube frontier. Roman historian Eutropius wrote that Trajan brought infinite multitudes of men from the whole Roman world to repopulate Dacia. According to Hadrian Oltian's 2007 study, Dacia, Landscape, Colonization, and Romanization, this was the most aggressive Roman resettlement program outside of Italy itself. The expected result? Complete genetic replacement. Look at Roman Britain. Its Roman DNA left almost no lasting trace in modern British people. The empire came, built roads, and when the legions left, so did their genetics. North Africa? Same pattern. Local populations were genetically diluted by Roman-era migrations. Every model predicted the same thing would happen in Dacia. It did not happen. Ancient DNA extracted from late Roman-era burial sites in Transylvania showed something that researchers described as almost unprecedented. When the local Dacian genetic signal did not disappear. The Carpathian Basin maintained genetic continuity that directly contradicted the standard Roman colonization model. Stop and think about what that means. The largest Roman colonization program in the ancient world, settlers from 3 continents pouring into a single conquered province, and the local population's DNA held its ground. But how? How does a conquered people preserve their bloodline against the most powerful colonization machine in ancient history? The answer was hidden in the landscape itself, and it was so simple that historians overlooked it for nearly 2,000 years. Rome loved cities. Roman settlers moved into urban centers, administrative posts, lowland trade routes, and river valley towns. That is where the money was. That is where the power was. That is where Roman culture planted its deepest roots. But the Dacians did not live in Roman cities. They retreated higher, into the Carpathian Mountains, the same peaks where their ancestors had built stone fortresses centuries before. Deep valleys, isolated ridgelines, places where Roman tax collectors rarely ventured and Roman settlers never wanted to live. A 2021 genetic study of Romanian rural populations documented something remarkable. Mountain isolated communities in Romania today show significantly higher rates of ancient Dacian-linked haplogroups than urban or lowland populations. The mountains did not just protect them militarily from Rome, they created genetic islands, pockets of biological time, communities that reproduced largely within themselves for generations, preserving ancient lineages that urban Romanians slowly lost through centuries of outside mixing. And there is a cultural fingerprint to prove it. When the Dacian shepherding tradition, moving flocks seasonally between mountain pastures and valley plains, kept rural communities connected to each other, but completely separate from Roman urban life. Even the Romanian language carries this secret. Modern Romanian contains hundreds of words with no Latin origin and no Slavic origin. Terms related to shepherding, animals, forests, and rural life, words that have no explanation in any language that came after the Dacians. They are almost certainly remnants of the Dacian language itself, preserved in the mouths of mountain shepherds who never needed to fully learn the empire's tongue. The mountains were not just geography. They were the greatest ancestor the Dacian people ever had. Rome fell in the west in 476 AD. Its eastern successor eventually abandoned the Danube frontier. The legions marched away, but the Dacians were still there. And what came next? Wave after wave after wave of new invaders should have finished what Rome started. Somehow, it did not. And the reason is where this story becomes almost impossible to believe. After Rome, the Carpathians became a corridor for every migrating people in post-ancient Europe. 270 AD, the Visigoths. 370 AD, the Huns, the people who destroyed the Goths and shook the Roman Empire to its foundations. 560 AD, the Avars, Eurasian nomads who dominated the region for 2 centuries. 600 AD, the Slavs, whose expansion across the Balkans is one of the largest demographic shifts in all of early medieval history. 680 AD, the Bulgars. In his 2001 landmark study, The Making of the Slavs, historian Florin Curta documented how Slavic populations moved across southeastern Europe in waves that left permanent genetic and cultural marks on almost every people they encountered. And the genetic evidence is clear, Slavic input did enter the modern Romanian genome during this period. But scientists who analyzed ancient DNA from across this region described what they found as a genetic palimpsest. You know what a palimpsest is? It is an ancient manuscript that was scraped clean and written over, because parchment was expensive and reused, but the original text was never fully erased. Centuries later, scholars can still see the old words bleeding through underneath the new ones. That is exactly what happened to Dacian genetics. 700 years of invasions, 5 different peoples, multiple waves of new ancestry layered on top, and the Dacian core signal still bled through underneath all of it. Look at what surrounds Romania today. Bulgaria, Slavic language. Serbia, Slavic language. Ukraine, Slavic language. Moldova, historically Slavic influenced. Say, Romania sits in the middle of this Slavic world speaking a Romance language, descended from Latin, not from any Slavic tongue. The biology held, the language held. Both of them preserved something that 700 years of invasion could not take away. But here is where modern science created a crisis that no historian was prepared for. When geneticists actually published the numbers, the real percentage of Dacian ancestry in modern Romanians, it did not just challenge history books. It tore through an entire national identity. Romanian national identity has long been built on a powerful idea. We are the direct descendants of the Dacians. Our blood is ancient. Our roots go deeper than any empire that tried to claim this land. For Romanian nationalist historians, Dacian continuity was not just history. It was the foundation of who Romanians are as a people. Then the genetic studies came out, and the number landed like a stone. Modern Romanians carry approximately 20 to 30% of their ancestry from pre-Roman Iron Age Balkan populations. The Dacian signal, real, measurable, scientifically confirmed, but one thread among many, alongside Slavic input, Roman-era ancestry, other Balkan migrations. The nationalist narrative wanted 100%. Science gave them 20 to 30. The academic argument that followed was fierce. On one side, geneticists like David Reich at Harvard, who argued that all modern populations are complex mixtures and that purity is a biological fiction. His work, published across multiple studies through the Max Planck Institute and Harvard Medical School, showed that no European population today is the pure descendant of any single ancient group. On the other side, historians who argued that 20 to 30% is not a footnote, that in a country of 19 million people, that means millions of living Romanians carry a direct biological thread running back over 2,000 years to warriors who fought Rome itself. Both sides were right, and here is the moment that makes this human rather than academic. A geneticist working with ancient Romanian DNA described finding a mitochondrial DNA match between a modern Romanian woman living in a village in Transylvania and a Dacian woman buried in the same valley 2,500 years ago. Not symbolically connected, measurably, biologically, genetically connected. That woman's great-grandmother's great-grandmother's great-grandmother, going back through 100 generations, walked the same hills, buried her dead in the same ground, and passed something forward through every invasion, every empire, every century of silence. But the argument over percentages had distracted everyone from asking the most important question. See if 20 to 30% of Dacian ancestry survived in Romania, where did the rest of it go? The answer was found not in Romania, not even inside Europe's borders as most people draw them today. In Wolfgang Hack's 2015 study published in Nature, one of the most important ancient DNA papers ever written, the team tracked how steppe ancestry moved across Europe through multiple migration waves, entering populations far beyond their original homeland. The same ancestral stream that fed Dacian genetics kept moving long after Rome conquered Dacia. Why DNA haplogroup? I2A1, the oldest European lineage, the one connected most directly to Dacian and pre-Dacian Balkan populations, appears today at elevated frequencies across Serbia, Bulgaria, Moldova, parts of southern Poland, and coastal Ukraine. These are not Romanian communities. Many of them have no conscious historical connection to Dacia. No one in those villages grows up being told their ancestors were Dacian warriors. But the DNA does not need a story to survive. It just survives. And then there is something even stranger than the genetics. The wolf symbol. The Dacian Draco, that wolf-headed battle standard, appears across Balkan folk traditions in countries that have no official connection to Dacian history. Embroidery patterns, mythology, local festivals, a cultural memory still traveling, still repeating, showing communities whose bloodlines quietly carry the same haplogroups. The culture remembered something the people had forgotten. Now here is something I want to ask you directly. If you have ever done a DNA test, and it showed Balkan ancestry, Romanian ancestry, Eastern European ancestry, drop your haplogroup in the comments right now, because you may be part of this story, not metaphorically, actually. But there is one final piece, one discovery made recently in a laboratory that did not ask where Dacian DNA went. It asked something far more dangerous. What did the Dacians know that we don't? The Dacians believed in Zalmoxis, a god who taught that death was not an ending, that the soul did not stop, that warriors who fell in battle were not dying, they were transforming, becoming something else, something beyond what ordinary men could see. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about Dacian warriors walking into battle without shields, without fear, sometimes even laughing, because in their understanding, what was about to happen to their bodies was not the end of what they were. Science can now do something remarkable. It can take a tooth from a Dacian warrior who died 2,100 years ago, extract DNA from inside that tooth, map his ancestry across 5,000 years, trace his haplogroup through every migration that came before him, find his living genetic descendants in 4 different countries today. A science can do all of that. What science cannot do is tell us whether he was afraid. It cannot tell us if he felt the weight of knowing his people were losing. If he believed, really believed, that his soul would go somewhere after the Roman blade found him. It cannot tell us if he knew, in some deep part of himself, that his bloodline would outlast the empire that killed him. The Dacians broke every rule history wrote about them. They were supposed to be erased, replaced, forgotten. Or instead, their DNA traveled across Eastern Europe without a passport. Their language echoed in the mouths of mountain shepherds who spoke Latin to tax collectors and Dacian to each other at home. Their wolf symbol is still woven into fabric by hands that do not know why it feels important. They were never gone. We just stopped looking. And right now, in laboratories across Europe, more ancient genomes are being sequenced. The Thracians, the Illyrians, the Picts, the Etruscans, on dozens of civilizations that history closed the book on. Every one of them is about to speak again. The Dacians showed us it is possible. The only question is, are you ready to listen? If this story moved you, share it with someone who thinks they know where they come from. Subscribe, because next time we go somewhere even older, even darker, and even more forgotten. The thread is not finished. It is just beginning.